In recent years, the theorist side of the Fnaf community has had a massive divide on the topic of the books. The community's favorite buzzword. Specifically, the Fazbear Frights and Tales from the Pizzaplex series. A massive half of the community very firmly believes in the idea that many of these stories and their core plot lines did happen in the actual story of Fnaf, therefore being in the timeline and therefore the games. Hence their theory names, Frights Games and Tales Games. And they do have some really solid merit to them. But considering you can read the title of this video, the merit is not solid enough for me. And I'm here to give a much needed explanation as to why. Because regardless of what you believe, I feel the community has forgotten why a lot of people consider these books just to be stories as opposed to canon in the first place. So let's hop into it. It's often said by Tales and Frights Games advocates that it's just plainly obvious that these books did actually happen in the continuity, but being obvious is exactly what's wrong with them. Hold on to this thought. It'll make sense later. So, let's talk about something I don't really see being talked about at all. The way Fnaf tells its story. Has anyone really noticed it? Because I've never seen it brought up before. Every single story in continuity of ye olde timeline is told in a very specific way. And it goes like this. A seemingly fairly simple premise on the surface, but when you look into it a little deeper, you can see a lot more to it, usually given to us in pieces. It's then up to the community to put these pieces together ourselves, and is rarely ever blunt with the overarching details. This right here is our formula. And when I say every single story in continuity, I really mean every single story in continuity. Nearly every game can be fit into this format. For example, UCN on the surface is just a challenge for competitive players of Fnaf. Also, yes, in case you didn't know, Fnaf has a competitive community. But underneath that exterior, you can put together that it is actually a story about Afton being kept alive by the spirit of one of his victims, and some kind of death cycle, tailored personally to torture William. And furthermore, this format of storytelling can be applied to not only the games, but certain books as well. The logbook seems to just be that, a children's logbook, an activity book. But looking a little closer and doing a little work, you can see two spirits communicating in the pages. It can even be found out what their names are. Okay, so on an unrelated note, I wrote this script before Hyperdroid found out what the crying child's name might be. I mean, I'm right, but yeah, just something I thought I'd say. But this is never explicitly told to you. Heck, even the interactive novels to some extent follow this vague formula. Even though they are the most straightforward the entire franchise has ever been about a lot of things, there's still some pieces of information that give room for theorizing when you read between the lines of the books. Pieces of media in Fnaf that go against our formula, however, like the Silver Eyes trilogy and the movie, are their own continuity. Okay, you follow? Good. We've pinned down a format of storytelling that can fit into every media of Fnaf that is within the main timeline. This being a plot on the surface that is fairly simple enough to where there's room to dig deeper and see some clues and tidbits that the fanbase has to work together to connect the dots for the overarching narrative. Any official media that doesn't follow this format is its own continuity. Alright, cool. Now that we know this, let's take a look back at Tales and Frights. Do they follow this formula? No. Absolutely not. Every single rule we just laid out is broken. There is no simple surface story. There is barely anything to dig for because most of the questions in the overarching narrative, at least in Stitchline, are answered thoroughly, giving little to no room for theorizing. Tales from the Pizzaplex, admittedly, is less like this, but it still deviates from most of the rules of FNAF storytelling, just to a lesser degree. That's the problem. It's too plainly obvious. Remember when I said, I said that. I said, remember when I said that? Yeah, do you remember when I said that? Yeah! So, the book series is dead in the water in this theory, and they're just one-offs, right? Well, obviously, no. They give us insight on important things, like added context to UCN, how ghosts work in the series, who Patient 46 is, some insight into FNAF 4, and, of course... But it still doesn't fit our format, unless maybe it does, if we look at it a different way. One thing I didn't mention about the narrative formula earlier is that 5 laps at Freddy's can actually be applied to it, despite being a kart racer spinoff with no continuity. It's worth noting that some people believe that it is an in-universe game, like Help Wanted. However, considering there should be no reason for the sinkhole to be there, if that is the case, maybe not. So anyway, I have something to confess. I lied. Official FNAF media following the narrative format doesn't automatically mean it's canon. There is a different way of it working when the premise on the surface didn't actually happen. In Fnaf, it only seems to be a one-off kart racer, but there are actually some key lore details in this game. Some that actually changed the foundation of a lot of theories, actually. Primarily, some massive implications about Midnight Motorist. So, our formula can actually work without, there actually being an animatronic go-kart race in the timeline. The hidden details like these can be canon without the surface plot being canon. So, can we apply that logic to these books? And if so, how would that work? Well, this would actually explain one of the most popular explanations for Tales and Frights. Yep. Our fan base's second favorite buzzword, parallel. Yippee! The stories in Fazbear Frights and Tales from the Pizzaplex can only fit into the narrative of FNAF as a whole if the secret details are the connections they have through narrative parallels. Yes, I know. This seems like a boring conclusion to come to, but it's really the only logical one I could find. The narrative of Fazbear Fright itself is the surface premise, and looking into it more, you could see some connections that mirror things to our main timeline. Again, without the media these connections come from being part of it. I guess this is why some of the most highly regarded theorists in the fandom consider these books to be non-canon reflections of the continuity. I think a good chunk of us were just subconsciously aware that this bizarre way of conveying the story even existed. But despite this, Tales games and Frights games are still very much on the table for me. Especially for Tales of the Pizzaplex, since it holds stronger than Frights. There is actually a good plate of evidence in favor of these books taking place within the main continuity, especially with recent evidence. It's just that, in my personal opinion, they can't really fit into it that way without breaking the rules of its storytelling. So, there it is. The real reason as to why FNAF's Tales from the Pizzaplex and Fazbear Frights might not be canon. At least the conclusion I came to. Please remember that this is a theory and should not be taken as fact. You are welcomed and even more so encouraged to come to your own conclusion. Speaking of conclusions, if you made it to the end of the video, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This is the first time I've ever actually put out any of my theories. And also, my voice hurts. So I'm gonna drink water, and so should you. Stay hydrated. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe. Please like. Whatever. Bye. My throat hurts so bad. Also, please, Secret of the Mimic, please be the make-all, break-all to this debate. I do not care if my theory gets shot dead. I need this stupid debate to end, and I need to see if Fry Toast is going to do the Stand Wrong song or not, please! That is within... Oh, what the fuck? Why did I blanked. It's often Tales by Tales... What?